Plato's most famous analogical argument, the city-soul analogy, begins in earnest on 368 C. Let me read. Glaucon and the others begged me not to abandon the argument, but to help in every way to track down what justice and injustice are and what the truth about their benefit is. So I told them what I had in mind. The investigation we're undertaking is not an easy one, but requires keen eyesight. Therefore, since we're not clever people, we should adopt the method of investigation that we'd use if, lacking keen eyesight, we were told to read small letters from a distance, and then we noticed that the same letters existed elsewhere in a larger size and on a larger surface. We'd consider it a godsend, I think, to be allowed to read the larger ones first and then to examine the smaller ones to see whether they really are the same. That's certainly true, said Adeimantus, but how is this case similar to our investigation of justice? I'll tell you. We say, don't we, that there is the justice of a single man and also the justice of a whole city? Certainly. And a city is larger than a single man? It is larger. Perhaps then there is more justice in the larger thing, and it will be easier to learn what it is. So if you're willing, let's first find out what sort of thing justice is in a city, and afterwards look for it in the individual, observing the ways in which the smaller is similar to the larger. That seems fine to me. And off they go. And so the argument proceeds, this famous analogical argument. And what Plato, that is to say the character Socrates, is going to do is he is going to break the city down into three parts. And he's going to break the human soul down into three parts. And he's going to identify three corresponding virtues. And from this, he will derive his definition of justice. I have put in the first part of the city. The larger circle here is going to represent the city. And I'm going to fill these in as we go forward in our discussion of the city-soul analogy. The producers are the bottom level and the lowest level of the city, and that's who he's going to be talking about for the rest of Book 2. Let's jump over to 369b, where Socrates says, I think a city comes to be because none of us is self-sufficient, but we all need many things. Do you think that a city is founded on any other principle? No. And because people need many things, and because one person calls on a second out of one need and on a third out of a different need, many people gather in a single place to live together as partners and helpers. And such a settlement is called a city. Isn't that so? It is. And if they share things with one another, giving and taking, they do so because each believes that this is better for himself. That's right. I want you to notice something. You may be familiar with what philosophers like John Locke or Rousseau have called the social contract theory. And you might think that that theory is one of modern philosophy from the 17 or 1800s. But this seems quite clearly to be an example of social contract theory right here in Plato. So come then, let's create a city from its very beginnings. What do we need? Well, we need someone to provide food. We need shelter. We need clothes. We need a farmer, a builder, a weaver, a cobbler. We need medical care. And so it goes. And I hope that you will enjoy book two. I really enjoy book two. It's a really fun book. Most of the rest of the book, he's just talking about, the city and building the city here. On the next page, that is 370D. Hence, we need carpenters, metal workers, and other craftsmen. And there's stuff that will also need to be imported. So we'll need importers and exporters. They're called merchants. And some of the trade might be need to do that by sea. So we'll need sailors and people to make ships. We'll need currency for the exchange. 371D. There will be people who will notice this and provide the requisite service. In well-organized cities, they'll usually be those whose bodies are the weakest and who aren't fit to do the other work. They'll stay around the market exchanging money for the goods of those who have something to sell, and then exchanging those goods for the money of those who want them. That sounds like me right there. I think I would be a merchant. And there would be servants too, and there would be those who sell their strength for a wage. They would be called wage earners. And don't forget, we need all kinds of other things. We'll need salt. This is on the 372C. We'll need salt and olives and cheese and boiled roots and vegetables. We'll need figs and chickpeas and beans, roast myrtle and acorns by the fire. We'll need to have proper couches, dine at a table. We'll need delicacies and desserts. Well, I need to have all of these things in a luxurious city. At 373, we need all the delicacies and perfumed oils, incense, prostitutes, and pastries. Can't have a city without prostitutes and pastries. Painting and embroidery must be brought in. We need gold and ivory and all the like. Hunters and artists and imitators and those who work with shape and color and many with music. We must have poets and their assistants and actors and choral dancers, contractors and makers of all kinds of devices, including, among other things, those for the adornment of women. We'll need other kinds of servants too, including tutors and wet nurses and nannies, beauticians, barbers, chefs, cooks, and swineherds. And don't forget doctors. We need medical care. We will need doctors. The next step is war. And we're going to get into talking about the guardians in a second. We'll talk more about the guardians at the beginning of book 4, but the guardians are going to be the next level. And he's going to start talking actually about the guardians right here. He begins talking about the guardians at 373D. He begins to talk about their the kind of attitude that they must have. They must be spirited. They must have the same kind of attitude that a dog has. A dog has an attitude where a dog, when he sees a stranger, is suspicious, but is friendly and welcoming when he sees a friend. Then there's a very interesting bit here at 376E. He says, well, what should the education of all these people be? Well, it should begin with physical training for our bodies and music and poetry for our soul. That's how it begins. And what should be the first thing? Well, it should be the stories that we tell our children. I think this is really interesting. It says the stories that we tell our children the first ones, on the whole, are false. It's interesting. It's interesting to me that even 400 years before Jesus, we started with false stories before true ones. Then he says something that I find shocking. Right here at 377 C. Then we must, first of all, it seems, supervise the storytellers. We'll select their stories whenever they are fine or beautiful and reject them when they aren't. Wow, is Plato advocating censorship? Through the character of Socrates? Socrates, who was executed by the state for his free speech? This feels complicated, to say the least. And this is where book 2 ends. I'll be back in the next video with a brief recap of book 3. We're not reading book 3. I'll have a brief recap of what happens in book 3. And then we'll get back to talking about the Guardians, which we're going to do more of in book 4.